Who is piloting the UAPs or UFOs constantly seen in our skies? Where are they from? Why are they here? How long have they been here? What is their mission on planet Earth? Do they come in peace or do they have more sinister motives? Join your host, Mad Mark, as he uncovers the answers to these questions and many more of the mysteries that have puzzled mankind for centuries on Who Are the Aliens? The history of the Anunnaki on planet Earth. And now, here's Mad Mark. Today's episode, The 12th Planet. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Who Are the Aliens? The history of the Anunnaki on planet Earth. I'm Mad Mark, and today we will resume our studies of Zecharia Sitchin's first book, The 12th Planet, published by Stein and Day in 1976. We're up to chapter 6, and we are going to start off this chapter by discussing the Sumerians' advanced knowledge of the heavens and, as is the title of the book we're learning from, the 12th planet. So, if intelligent beings arrived on Earth in the distant past, where did they come from? In the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, whenever someone would have a sighting of a UFO or just be involved in a conversation about that topic, it was most likely Mars or Venus that would be suggested as their most probable place of origin. Obviously, due to advancements in satellite technology and space probes, we now know that that is not the case. Those two planets are incapable of supporting life. Although I would like to insert a little teaser here for a future episode, Mars wasn't always incapable of supporting life. That should give you a little something to think about as we continue. So, logically, many people turn to looking at galaxies outside of our own as the places of origin for these alien visitors. The advantage of that theory, of course, is that although it cannot be proved, it can also not be disproved. But the main disadvantage of that theory is that it would require years and years of space travel at the speed of light in order to arrive here on Earth. And that is definitely not what the Sumerians wrote about as the location of the home of these gods. They knew of this heavenly abode, and the fact that while Enki, Enlil, and Ninhursag came to Earth and made their homes here, Anu remained in the heavenly abode as its ruler. The Sumerians not only made reference to this in various texts, but also named 21 kings and queens who preceded Anu on the throne as rulers. At this point, Mr. Sitchin goes into a list of everyone in Anu's royal court and his commanders and how well guarded everything is there and the protocols and procedures for entering Anu's court. I'm not going into all of that here for the sake of time, but if you're interested in all of that, as I've said before, read the book. These Sumerian gods not only originated in the heavens, but could also return to the heavens at will. We see many examples of this in the Sumerian texts, such as when Anu would come to Earth on state visits, and Enlil's spaceport was known as the Bond of Heaven and Earth. The Adapa also made a trip and returned to tell about it. The Sumerians knew that the gods often traveled to the heavenly abode and back again, but they also knew that this abode was within our own solar system. So, where is it located? Early Sumerian artists answered that question in their many depictions of our sun, with 11 smaller celestial bodies encircling it. The catch here is that if you count the moon, as the ancient people did, our solar system is comprised of the sun and 10 planets, but that is not what the Sumerians portrayed. They claimed that there is a 12th member of our solar system, the home of the Nephilim, the 12th planet. Now, before we examine the accuracy of the Sumerian information, let's first examine our own knowledge regarding this subject. We know today that beyond Jupiter and Saturn lie two more planets, Uranus and Neptune, plus a smaller one, Pluto. But the knowledge of these last three planets is actually quite recent. In 1781, advancements in our telescope technology allowed us to discover Uranus, and after observing it for about 50 years, astronomers reached the conclusion that its orbit was being influenced by yet another planet. Guided by these calculations, Neptune was discovered in 1846. But by the end of the 19th century, it was discovered that Neptune too was being subjected to an unknown gravitational pull, and this puzzle was solved in 1930 with the discovery of Pluto. So, until 1780, and for all the centuries prior to that, men believed that there were only 7 members to our solar system. Please note that Earth was not considered a planet yet at this time, because it was still believed in those days that Earth was the center of the solar system and that all the other bodies circled it because, after all, Earth was the most important celestial body created by God, the one with his greatest creation, man, living on it.
That is illogical, Ensign.
Indeed. And also quite naive. But such was the mentality of that time period. Textbooks generally credit Nicholas Copernicus for discovering that indeed the sun was the center of our solar system and that the planets revolved around it. But he had to wait to announce his findings until he was on his deathbed due to fears of the wrath of the Catholic Church. You see, that's why they were known as the Dark Ages. But this sun-centered solar system concept was only rediscovered by Copernicus, and the most interesting part about that is that man knew more about our solar system in 500 BC than they did in 500 AD or up to 1500. Astronomical scholars have struggled to explain why the Greeks and then the Romans assumed that the Earth was flat, especially when evidence left by even earlier Greek scholars indicated that they knew otherwise. One hint here, the Church. The works of Eudoxus, an early Greek astronomer and mathematician, have been lost over time, but were partially saved for us through the 3rd century BC poetry of Aratus. In one of these poems, which must have been familiar to St. Paul since he quoted from it, the constellations are described in great detail, and the credit for this knowledge is given to, quote, some men of yore. And who were these men of yore? Well, based on certain clues in these poems, modern astronomers believe that the Greek verses described the heavens as they were described in the Mesopotamian text circa 2200 BC. Were the early Greek astronomers better informed than their successors because they drew their knowledge from Mesopotamian sources? Mr. Sitchin claims that is absolutely true, and in the book, he goes on to describe in great detail just how astronomically advanced the Sumerians were. They were familiar with comets, meteors, and other celestial phenomenon, and could calculate the relationships between the movements of the sun, the moon, and the earth, and predict eclipses. Their knowledge was incredible, and much of this knowledge requires extremely long periods of observation in order to grasp it and track it. Can it really be true that the ancient Sumerians, without the possession of the proper instruments, actually had the sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge to calculate all of this? And there's more. Until the invention of the telescope, European astronomers accepted the Ptolemaic recognition of only 19 constellations in the northern skies. But by 1925, when the current classification was agreed upon, 28 constellations had been recognized, which the Sumerians knew all along. Basically, the same is true regarding the southern constellations. Yes, the Sumerians knew many things about the heavens that they simply should not have been capable of knowing with the instruments and the science of their time, and yet they did, because of the knowledge given to them by the Nephilim, capable of space travel, arriving on Earth from another planet, roaming Earth's skies, and they were the only ones who could possess astronomical information that required millennia to develop at the dawn of mankind's civilization. So, considering all of this, do you honestly believe that the Sumerians were unaware of the 3 planets in our solar system that lie past Saturn? Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But there was more. Because the Sumerians knew of one more planet, teaching humanity the true nature of Earth and the heavens, the Nephilim informed the ancient astronomer priests not only of the planets beyond Saturn, but also of the existence of the most important planet, the one that they called home, the 12th planet. Would it interest you to know that the ancient Sumerians also had a creation epic, which explains how our solar system was created? Yes, they did. Now, if I were a teacher and you were all my students, I would definitely assign Chapter 7 for you to read. But as informative as the creation of our solar system is, it is also quite detailed and lengthy, and it would not translate well into podcast format. So I'm going to simply touch on the high points for our purposes here, but I highly recommend that you read Chapter 7 for yourselves. And as you do, allow yourselves to contemplate the following questions, which will most certainly enter your thoughts. Because Chapter 7 answers so many questions that our scientists and astronomers have been debating for years and still have no solid answers as we speak. First of all, the burning question: how could the ancient Sumerians possibly have known this information? And secondly, how could they have known about the creation of the asteroid belt when they shouldn't have even known that it existed? In the Sumerian creation epic, we read that there were originally 9 planets, same as now, but that one of these planets was called Tiamat and was located in between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt lies today. Then, a new planet enters the picture. Formed far out in deep space, this planet was pulled into our solar system by the gravitational forces of Neptune. This new planet was obviously still in a very plastic stage, and as it drew closer to Neptune, the gravitational forces on it increased, causing the side of the planet to bulge. Then, as the planet's orbit continued on, and it reached the vicinity of Uranus, the gravitational pull on it was so great that chunks of matter began to tear away from it, creating 4 satellites or moons. For anyone who isn't aware of it, the planets in our solar system rotate around the sun counterclockwise. But this new planet was pulled in with a clockwise rotation, and as it moved on its course, it was then seized by the incredible gravitational and magnetic forces of Saturn and Jupiter. This caused its path to bend even more inward into the center of our solar system, and right into the path of Tiamat. The gravitational pull of this new larger planet approaching began to tear away parts of Tiamat as it drew closer. 11 satellites or moons were formed around Tiamat. One of these new moons, the one of particular importance to the Sumerian creation epic, was named Kingu. Subjected to conflicting gravitational pulls, Kingu began to shift towards the new planet. Meanwhile, as the new planet passed Saturn, it caused Pluto, a former moon of Saturn, to tear loose from its orbit. This close proximity to Saturn also caused 3 more moons, satellites, to tear away from the new planet and join the other 4 in orbit around it. So, to recap, because I know this is confusing, our young, unstable solar system, consisting of the Sun and 9 planets, was still in the process of stabilizing when suddenly it was invaded by a new large comet-like planet from deep space. This new planet, coming in with a clockwise orbit, passed the huge planets of Neptune and Uranus, causing 4 satellites to tear away from it and orbit around it. As the new planet's path continued past Saturn and Jupiter, its course was bent inwards towards the center of the solar system, causing 3 more moons to tear away and form around it, and sending it on a direct collision course with the planet Tiamat. But Tiamat and the new planet never collided. Instead, it was the satellites and moons of the new planet that crashed into Tiamat. This caused the still forming Tiamat shape to stretch out and become elongated. And it was at that point that an immense bolt of electricity jumped as a spark from the energy-charged new planet right into the heart of Tiamat, not destroying it, but leaving it with its own electric and magnetic forces extinguished. It was that same magnetic discharge that sent Tiamat's 10 satellite moons shooting off into the vast expanse of the heavens, creating the comets. You know, comets are the rebellious members of our solar system. They do not obey any of the normal rules that the other heavenly bodies do. Their orbits are not circular like a planet, but are instead very elongated, causing many of them to disappear from view for hundreds of thousands of years at a time. And their orbits are in the opposite direction of the planets, just like the new planet's orbit is. After the collision, the new planet continued on its way around the sun, and of course back around again to once again cross paths with Tiamat. And it's at this point that the Mesopotamian epic of creation and the biblical book of Genesis are joined. This time, the new planet actually hits the weakened Tiamat, splitting it in 2. Then, one of the new planet's moons strikes one of the separated halves, sending it into an orbit where no planet had been before. Earth had been born. And then, as the new planet once again hit what was left of Tiamat, the asteroid belt was created. Tiamat's chief satellite, Kingu, we mentioned that earlier, now becomes the Earth's moon, and the rest of Tiamat's satellites, as I said earlier, are now the comets. Our Earth and the asteroid belt are heaven and earth of both Mesopotamian and biblical references, both created when Tiamat was dismembered by the new planet or the celestial lord. So there you have it. All of the questions and mysteries of our solar system answered and solved. The oceanic cavities on Earth, the asteroid belt, the reverse orbits of the comets, all revealed through the Mesopotamian creation epic. And it also explains the devastation on the moon, especially the devastation facing Earth. Have you ever wondered where, since the moon doesn't rotate, all of that crater damage that we see when we look at it came from? The Earth isn't lobbing meteors and comets at the moon, so how did that damage get there? Well, now you know. Mr. Sitchin once again goes into a lot more detail on the Mesopotamian creation epic in The 12th Planet, and I highly suggest that you check it out for yourself. If you do choose to read it for yourself, you will notice that the new planet is referred to in the creation epic as Marduk, but the Sumerians called it the planet Nibiru, and that is the name that I choose to reference it as. Now, you may be asking yourself why, if Nibiru's orbit takes it repeatedly past where Tiamat was once positioned, which is relatively close to us, between Mars and Jupiter, why have we never seen this large, bright planet? Well, whenever archaeologists uncover remains of Near Eastern civilizations, the symbol of the winged globe is usually present, dominating temples and palaces, carved on rocks, etched on cylinder seals, painted on walls. It accompanies kings and priests, it's on their thrones, hovering above them in battle scenes, the list goes on. Many clay, metal, stone, and wood objects feature this symbol. This symbol was revered by leaders of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, and on and on. Hittite kings, Egyptian pharaohs, Persian shahs all proclaimed this symbol as supreme, and it remained so for millennia. It's even on my necklace. Oh, wrong one. There. Central to the religious beliefs and the astronomy of the ancient world was the insistence that the 12th planet, or planet of the gods, was a part of our solar system, and that its grand elliptical orbit, similar to that of the comets, occasionally brought it back into Earth's vicinity. Truly, all of the people of the ancient world considered the periodic nearing of the 12th planet as a time of upheavals, great changes, and new eras. And of course, the Mesopotamian texts speak of Nibiru's periodic appearance as an anticipated, predictable, and observable event. At this point in the book, Mr. Sitchin gives several examples of biblical end-time prophecies that are actually referring to the effects on the gravitational pull of planet Earth as Nibiru passes by. Earthquakes, floods, and other disasters are usually common during these episodes as Earth's axial spin is affected. In the Bible, Zechariah writes, "And it shall come to pass on that day, there shall be no light. Uncommonly shall it freeze. And there shall be one day known to the Lord, which shall be neither day nor night, when at eventime there shall be light." The prophet Joel wrote that on the day of the Lord, the sun and the moon shall be darkened, the stars shall withdraw their radiance, the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon shall be as red as blood. A cylinder seal found in Nippur actually shows a depiction of a group of plowmen looking up in awe at Nibiru, which is clearly visible in the sky. Nibiru's periodic appearance and disappearance from Earth's view confirms the assumption of its permanence in our solar orbit. And, as I mentioned before, its orbit is like that of many of the comets that it helped to create. Halley's Comet, for instance, can only be seen from Earth every 75 years. And then there's the comet Kohoutek, which was last spotted from Earth in 1974, and astronomers calculate that it will not be seen again for 75,000 years. Now, the fact that we have human records, albeit old ones, from history of people witnessing Nibiru from Earth suggests that its orbit is not 75,000 years like that of Kohoutek. But if that's true, why are modern-day astronomers not aware of its existence? It has been calculated that Nibiru's orbit lasts approximately 3,600 years, which means that at its furthest point, it would be roughly 6 times further away from us than Pluto, a distance from which it would not be visible from Earth. Even the known planets beyond Saturn were first discovered mathematically, not visually. Now, according to the ancient Sumerian texts, each orbit of Nibiru around the Sun is known as a shar. When Earth does it, it's a year. When Nibiru does it, it's a shar. I just want everyone to understand that, because that is a fact of great importance that will resurface again and again throughout the history of this podcast. And I don't want anyone to get confused. Again, one complete cycle around the Sun for Earth is a year. One complete cycle around the Sun for Nibiru is a shar. And I think you can see where this is going. It takes Nibiru 3,600 years to complete an orbit. Then, likewise, a shar is 3,600 Earth years. Berosus, the Babylonian priest, astronomer, and scholar, spoke of 10 rulers of Earth before the Great Flood. And these 10 kings ruled in Mesopotamia for 120 shars, Not 120 years, 120 shars. That's 432,000 years. Alaris reigned for 10 shars. Elapris reigned for 3 shars, and so on and so forth. Now, this is according to the Sumerian Kings List, which spans the time from when kingship was lowered from heaven until the time of the deluge. Mr. Sitchin suggests that these pre-diluvial rulers were in fact Nephilim who came to earth from Nibiru. So then it shouldn't be surprising that they would choose to measure their reigns in shars rather than earthly years. But it's no wonder that scholars speak of the length of these 10 kings' reigns as legendary. Now, as I stated before, and I think that everyone understands this, a year is simply the time it takes for Earth to make one trip around the sun. Now, because life developed on Earth while it was already orbiting the sun, life on Earth is patterned by this length of orbit. We each live however many years because our biological clocks are geared to just so many Earth orbits around the sun. With that being the case, there can be little doubt that life on another planet would be geared or timed to the orbital cycles of that planet. And so, if Nibiru takes 3,600 Earth years to make one of its orbits around the sun, well, the beings on that planet would literally seem immortal to Earthlings. To put this in perspective, if Nibiru was spotted coming through our solar system right now, the beings on it would only have aged 1 year in appearance since it last appeared in our year of 1575 BC. Now, obviously, those calculations are off because we don't know for sure when the last time was that Nibiru came around. We'll talk about that more on a later show. And it's obviously not here again right now, or people would be seeing it. It would be rather hard to miss. But the point I'm trying to make is that when it does eventually make its next appearance, its inhabitants will only appear to have aged 1 year since the last time it appeared. Now, before we start getting into the voyages of the Nephilim to Earth, why they came here in the first place, their early settlements, and so forth, could beings physically not much different from us have evolved on another planet? And if so, could these beings have had the capability of interplanetary space travel 500,000 years ago? The first part of this question taps into a basic inner human need to know. We've been asking this question at the very least since I was a small boy. Is there life as we know it anywhere else in the universe besides right here on Earth? Well, scientists now know that there are innumerable galaxies throughout the cosmos that contain countless stars like our sun. There are literally billions of places where life could generally exist outside of Earth. And as it turns out, scientists have learned that you don't necessarily have to be located near a sun to have enough heat on your planet to support life. Case in point, Jupiter. That's right. The Pioneer spacecraft, launched in 1972, discovered that although much further away from the sun than we are here on Earth, Jupiter is so hot that it must have its own sources of energy and heat. A planet with an abundance of radioactive elements at its core would not only generate its own heat, but it would also experience substantial volcanic activity. And volcanic activity would provide an atmosphere. If said planet were large enough to exert a strong gravitational pull, it could, in essence, keep its atmosphere almost indefinitely. And such an atmosphere would create a hothouse effect that would shield the planet from the cold of outer space, in the same way that clothing helps us to stay warm by not letting our body heat escape. With this in mind, the ancient Sumerian text's description of Nibiru as being clothed with a halo becomes significant. It was always referred to as a radiant planet, and the various depictions of it, discovered through the years, shows it as emitting rays. Nibiru could then be generating its own heat and retain that heat because of its atmospheric mantle. And with that, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I will pick things up from this point at the beginning of episode 4. So what did we learn this week? Well, quite a bit actually. First, we discussed where an alien race visiting Earth might have come from, and that in fact Nibiru is a planet in our own solar system. We studied how the ancient Sumerians had advanced knowledge of our solar system. In that same vein, we learned that the true story of the creation of our solar system, including the origin of the asteroid belt and the creation of Earth, is all written in the Sumerian texts. We looked at why the Nephilim, or Anunnaki, live so long, why they seem almost immortal when compared to us. We learned how certain planets are capable of generating their own heat, and thus how Nibiru can exist and even thrive, even though it spends the majority of its time far out in space, away from the heat of the sun. And that is where I leave you for this episode. You have quite a lot to digest there, and we have so much more to cover and learn. I'm Mad Mark, and I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If so, please tell your friends and help spread the word. I also wish to remind everyone that once again, listening to this podcast is no excuse to not read the book that we're discussing here, The 12th Planet by Zecharia Sitchin. It is an amazing work, and I'm leaving out much information in order to keep the podcast flowing properly. So do yourself a favor and read that book. Today we have taken another step in our ongoing journey to find the truth. I promise you that things will get more and more interesting the further we delve into this topic of who are the aliens, the history of the Anunnaki on planet Earth. This has been Who Are the Aliens? The History of the Anunnaki on Planet Earth with your host, Mad Mark. Join us again on our next program when Mad Mark will once again uncover the answers to more of the mysteries that puzzle mankind.